What's up, YouTube? I'm MC Go 101, and in today's video, we're going to be changing out the rear struts on a 2008 Acura TL. All right, so I feel like I have to go through with this because I have the original struts in, and I am getting some clunking and banging in the rear end. It's not terrible, but it is noticeable. And I've also noticed a slight sagging in the rear end. Not a lot, but it is there. So just trying to refresh the ride quality, I'm going to change out the rear struts. So I went ahead and ordered these GSP rear struts. I got these from Parts Avatar. Now the reason I went with these, and here's some of the details, and I'll try and walk you through it. But a lot of the other aftermarket struts, they didn't even have descriptions on how they made them, the quality control, etc., etc. Obviously, I recommend OEM, but they are really expensive. I think I'm looking at 5, 6, maybe more Canadian per strut. I opted to go with GSP. I've used their axles without issue. They seem to try to make good quality parts. I've used Monroe quick struts in the past on an old TL. Unfortunately, it raised the ride height up way too much, and it kind of drove like a boat. So I'm trying to avoid that, trying to restore the OE ride quality the best I can within a budget, obviously. But some of the key points to the strut are they are all new engineered to provide OE form, fit, and function to restore factory fresh ride comfort. The struts feature high-performance tri-lock PTFE piston rod seals, chrome-plated piston rods, and a nitrogen gas charge. They have quality components for longer service life and durability. Coil springs feature cold-rolled SAE 9254 rated spring steel for durability. Premium high-quality strut mounts are designed to eliminate transfer of harmonic resonance to the vehicle body. So in a nutshell, you can tell that they've at least tried to make a good quality strut. I will get them installed, get it aligned, and I'll do a follow-up on how they're working. But yeah, so you're going to need some tools, obviously. Impact, 19 mil for your lug nuts. Some kind of drill or small impact with an extension for the 10 mil. We do have to remove the rear seat. You'll need various amounts of sockets, so at least a 3/8 ratchet with a socket set. And then you'll also need jacks, jack stands, and a torque wrench to put everything back together. Something else to note is possibly when you go to remove the old struts, the sway bar links in the rear may be in the way. So you may want to have a look and see how old and corroded yours are. Because if you have to remove them and they're old, you may just end up replacing them. And it's just something to keep note of before we get into the job. All right, guys, without further ado, let's get started. All right, guys, so the first thing we got to do, we have to remove the bottom portion of the seat. So in the center of the seat, there are going to be 2 clips. So with a pinching motion underneath the middle of the seat, you'll want to grab a hold of the clip and push down on the seat as you pull out, and that will loosen the front. You'll also want to do the same for the other side. So the next step, there is going to be one 10mm fastener on the passenger side. Now I am on to the bolt right now. It is just behind the seatbelt buckle on the passenger side, and it's in between the seats. So we'll go ahead and remove that. And we can remove our rear seat. Okay, so now we have to work on the back seat. So there's going to be multiple fasteners. Now on each side, at the bottom of the back seat, there will be a 10 mil fastener. And we'll do the same for the other side. So this one's a little tricky, but let me show you. So inside the back seat, if you look up top at the headrest, you'll see a split. So right down in the middle of that split, there are a fastener on each side. So that's why I have the extension on the mini impact. We're going to reach down in, and you may have to feel around to get onto that 10. You don't have to, remove it all the way. The seat just kind of locks onto the bolt. But if it gives you a hard time, you can just remove it. Just have to be careful, trying not to lose the bolt. But we'll go ahead and get those done now. You can move your headrest up. Okay, so quick little tip. When getting the fastener out just below the headrest, when pulling the socket out, it has a tendency to want to keep the socket in there. So a quick little tip, you just throw a little tape on your extension to hold that bit on. So then we'll go ahead and get the driver's side, and again, just underneath the headrest, through that slit. You'll have to feel around and carefully fish that out. And one more fastener on the driver's side. All right, so the fasteners under the headrest, once you get locked onto them, we're going to back them out all the way. Once you have the fasteners underneath the headrest removed, you can carefully pop it up and bend it forward. You'll just want to get the side seat belts out of the way. And it would also help to move your front seats forward. All right, guys, so once you have your back seat pulled down and out of the way, now we finally have access to the top of the strut mount. So I'll do my best to show you here. But in these little holes, get some light in for you, you can see the top of the strut mount. So on the TL, it's only secured with two 14mm nuts. So I've just used a 3/8 ratchet with a deep 14mm. I start at the back. So a couple different ways you can do it. You could remove the bolts right now, or you could loosen them almost all the way off. If you take the nuts off, when you get to the lower portion of the strut, it could drop out. So you could just leave these nuts hanging by a thread. That way the strut doesn't fall out later on. So I'm going to go ahead and get these all loosened up on both sides. And you can also, if need be, move this just a little bit to get to what you got to get to. So like I said, I'm going to leave these hanging on by a thread before I get onto the car. All right, let's get on to the next step. Also, side note, before I get too far, now if you did remove your back seat headrest bolts completely, you'll likely find them in the back, and with the little magnet, you should be able to fish them out. All right, guys, so we are on to the next step. Just as a quick recap, we have pulled our bottom seat, we have removed or got out of the way the back bench seat, and inside the upper strut mounts, I have loosened off the nuts for the the strut. Now, I haven't taken the nuts off because I don't want the strut to fall out just yet. So that is like the most tedious part of the job. Once you get past that, you're going to want to jack up the rear of the vehicle. Now, since I don't have a hoist, I'm using the tow hitch connector underneath the trunk, and I have a 3-ton floor jack on it. You'll pull your wheels. You'll get your jack stands in place, which I have under the frame there. And then we'll get you in a little closer. All right, now that we're in a little bit closer, you'll see here is your strut, obviously. In behind it, you'll see is the sway bar link. The strut bolt on the bottom is going to be a 17 mil. Now, to get this out without having to fight night and day, I am going to loosen off just the upper portion of the sway bar link. So over on this side, it is, well, in my case, I've just replaced them. So they are an aftermarket, but I have a 15 mil. So I'm going to go ahead and crack those loose. Once they're cracked loose, I'll use a power tool to back them out. All right, so continuing on, like I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to crack the sway bar link loose, and we'll remove the nut, and we're just going to move the top portion of the link out of the way so we can remove the strut. And just want to be careful of the brake lines, ABS lines. And then we can move this sway bar link out of the way. Just like that. So now, last but not least, the lower strut bolt is a 17 mil. So I have a 1/2-inch ratchet on that. And to crack it loose, I just use a extension with a large deep socket. Goes over your ratchet, gives you extra leverage to crack that loose. All right, phone battery died on me, so back at it. We're working on the lower strut bolt. I've already cracked it loose by hand, and now I have a power tool on it. We'll try to zip it out. And now that is going to be under some pressure. So I'm going to take a simple punch, just something like that. Stick it in the one side, and just going to use a rubber mallet to tap that out. And there we have our lower strut bolt. I'll go ahead and fish that out, put that to the side. Now, the fun begins. So now we have to wrestle our old strut out of position. So obviously you want to make sure the car is still jacked. You have your jack stands. What I'm going to try and do is tap that out of its hole with a rubber mallet. And if my rubber mallet doesn't work, I'll get a bigger hammer. And it's already shifted. Just like that. So now our strut is free from the knuckle. And because we haven't undone the bolts on the upper strut mount, it didn't fall down on us. Now, very carefully, let me get some better light on this. So now that the strut is loose, I'm going to reach in carefully to the upper strut mount and start taking off those nuts. And just like that. So you want to be careful not to lose the upper strut mount or nut. And carefully, we have to plan our route of exit. So now the strut has dropped down. So this is where releasing the sway bar link is going to come in handy. Because now, hopefully, I can fish it down and out. Or if you're very careful, you could also pull it out the side. And here is our old strut. Let's see if I can get a better picture of this. You've done good, Honda Strut, but it's time to refresh the vehicle. So that is how you get the one out. We're going to show you how to get the new one in. It's not that bad. Reverse of what we just done. We're going to put this to the side and we'll get our new one ready to install. Alright, so I figured before I put the new one in, I'd do a quick comparison of the new and old. So you can see that there's a lot of rust on this unit, the original, and even some wear on the coil, which is rare because usually they hold up pretty good. But they seem to be almost identical lengths. The OEM may be a couple millimeters longer. Also noted that springs are lined up, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the new one. So we'll see how that affects performance. I will do a review. You'll also see that the OEM goes right up to the strut mount, where the aftermarket has the bump stop and a bit of a gap, but shouldn't be an issue. So sad, but things do wear out, and I think it was time. So let's get set up to install the new one. Alright guys, so we are getting ready to install our new strut. The first thing I'd recommend doing, just as a precaution, but up where the strut lives, let's see if I can get a picture of it. I'm just going to wipe that area, make sure there's no grime, rocks, or anything that's going to get in the way of the actual strut mount. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Yep, dirty. Alright. So, new strut came with new upper mounting nuts. You want to remove those. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You're going to want to do everything you can to not damage this new strut. So, we don't want to drop it. We don't want to bang it. What I've noticed is now that you have your strut out, your whole knuckle does flex. So I think it might be better in my case if I was to go in this way and then go back up. So I'm going to try and do that right now. And before I start finagling this in place, I am close enough that I can reach in the back door and put the mounting nuts on the top hat here. So once I get it in place, I'm going to want to hold it with my right arm, and I'm going to try to put the mounting nuts on with my left right through the door. So first things first, let's try and get her in place. So as carefully as I can. Okay, so what I found worked for me is when I fished the strut in down there, I had to slowly wiggle it up in place. But to get the strut mount actually into the frame of the car, you'll have to twist it a little bit, work it by the sway bar, and you may have to, with your hands, feel out where the bolts go up through the frame. But if you guide the main center bolt through, then you can twist it until you find its home. And then right hand on the strut, I reached in the car with a nut with my left hand and just threaded one on. So it is now in position, roughed in, but now I can go ahead and I'm going to loosely put these upper strut mount bolts on just to hold it in place, but I am not going to tighten them yet. Okay, now with the two upper strut mount nuts hand tightened, we can begin working on the lower strut bolt. So to do that, you may need a pry bar or a crowbar, but we have to realign this with its old home. Alright, so the lower strut bolt is a little bit trickier. What I found was where the strut lives, there's a bit of a groove on this bracket back here. So once you have the upper bolt in place, you have to wiggle it past the sway bar and then half into that bracket. And then what I did was, as I was pushing down on the hub, I managed to get it into the groove of that bracket. Then I used a rubber mallet on the very lowest part of the strut just to lightly tap it in place. And then what I used was a crowbar just to kind of wedge it back into its home. So the bolt hole is almost completely lined up. I'm just going to go ahead and get that fed back in. Alright, so once you're close to having the bolt hole lined up, what I did was I took a screwdriver and just inside the bolt hole, I used it to adjust the lineup of the bolt hole. And once I had it visually lined up, just tapped it in with a rubber mallet until it bottoms out. And there is a thread on the other side, so we'll be able to go ahead and zip this strut bolt back in. Excellent. Now, while we're at it, I'm going to reconnect the sway bar bushing, or sorry, sway bar link. And then we'll go ahead and tighten up our rear sway bar link. Just like that. Now, so we, again, have purposely left the upper strut mount bolts loose. They are just hand tightened for now. What I'm going to do is, the process is the exact same for the other side, so I'm going to end the video pretty much now. But just so you know, what I will do is once I complete the other side and I do the exact same thing, strut in place with the upper mounting bolts only hand tighten, I will then I'll replace the tire, clean anything up, remove both the jacks, and then when I put load on the car, like when the jacks are on the ground and out from underneath the car, that's when I will torque the upper strut bolts to specified torque. And I think there's a reason for that. You don't want the strut to not be sitting properly, so I'm pretty sure it's all supposed to be torqued down when there's load on the vehicle. So that is just something to note. So like I said, I wouldn't torque the upper strut mount bolts until the vehicle is on the ground, and that way they should seat nicely for you. Alright guys, so here is the new struts installed and how they look. Now it is sitting a little bit higher than it was, and the instructions do note that it will settle So once the weather clears up a little bit, I will take it for a little run. I do plan on getting it a 4-wheel alignment on it very soon. But I also just wanted to touch base on torque specs. So I got thinking about it, and the way I torqued it down, before I put the wheels back on, when the struts were in place, I took a small jack and I jacked up the knuckle to its normal ride height, and then I torqued the lower strut bolt to 44 foot-pounds. The sway bar length 29. I did that for both sides, cleaned everything up, reinstalled the tires, and then I torqued the upper strut mount bolts to 37 foot-pounds. So I did that. I did the uppers when the vehicle was on the ground, and I tried to recreate the bottom strut bolt in its normal position on the ground when I torqued it. So just a little FYI, that's what I would recommend doing, just to make sure that everything buttons down properly and is seated nice. All I can say is take your time. It can be done. Took me a couple solid hours, including filming, but I'm excited to take it out and test her all out. Hopefully this helps somebody. Thanks guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time.